Well, welcome, creatives, community, and kind folks. It is your host, RPG with DBJ. Thank you very much for joining me. Love to have you creatives, community, and kind folks, to be here to tolerate this last day of our um, eh, remote viewing of this broadcast of this show. But I did want to let you guys know that I did get to go to Galaxy's Edge. Some of the things there are a little bit truncated today. A lot of the live um, displays of things have been cut back on, but I did get to witness a chastisement by Kylo Ren and a bunch of stormtroopers walking around. Got to see Chewbacca and Ray and all that kind of stuff. Hey Cam, what's going on? Even got to pick up myself a grenade. Actually, it's not a grenade, of course. If you take a little bit closer look, you'll see that it's a Diet Coke, I believe, with all the nutritional facts and everything. And if you actually take a really close look right here, you won't be able to see it too much on the camera, but there's actually a use by date and whatnot. It looks like a grenade. There's a Coke, Diet Coke, and Sprite, and of course it's the top. It's a clear on the inside, and it's covered in like an additional adhesive layer, but it actually is pretty kind of cool. It's kind of cool. Here's currently $6 US. So yeah, it's only like 13 and a half ounces. But basically you get to keep it as a keepsake. So that's why they charge you so much for it. But of course I'm going to keep it as a keepsake. No, it is not a robot. Uh, but it does look like a BB-8 BB series right behind me. But anyway, it was kind of cool thing to pick up. And of course, you can't go into the park without a mask. So had to pick up a mask. Yeah, it'll get cola all over you. No, it's actually kind of cool. The Coke is like it the logo is kind of like this. It's actually straight across and it's black and it's scarring. Like if you take a look at this, you can see there's like brown scarring on it, so it looks kind of old and so that's done on purpose. That's not a stain. It's actually the discoloration is part of the creation of it. So it's really kind of cool. And then it's got a little top, and it's harder than you think it would be. It's not a soft item. So I'm going to take it on a plane with me, and I don't think it'll get crushed up at all. But anyway, all right, enough of that. enough of that series. Anyway, thank you very much for being here. We're going to end our week talking about the apocalypse. Now, of course, this channel is about tabletop RPGs, and we were talking the earlier this week about like zero level, first level things, cantrips, the most minor things in Dungeons and Dragons. If you take it to its fullest extent, it'll probably destroy society. And I, strangely enough, when we talk about these things for like fantasy gaming and Dungeons and Dragons, it's actually more relevant for science fiction because science fiction is essentially speculative, where fantasy is more about our dreams and our wish fulfillment and a lot of our nightmares. Science fiction is our outlet for speculative what if scenarios, and a lot of science fiction allows us to do that. Now, you guys know I have a particular warm spot for transhumanism or post-humanism. Role playing games like Eclipse Phase and Altered Carbon and The Expanse are the top three that come to my mind. But there's plenty of others. Of course, you guys know far more about Warhammer 40K than I do. And so we're going to talk about some of the technologies that are like built into some of those settings where there isn't an apocalypse yet, or they've moved past one. And so we're just going to talk about some of those small little bits of technology that are really cool, but we're going to blast it a little bit and figure out like, I don't know if society is going to survive that. So let's go with let's start off with the dirtiest one that I'm sure everybody's going to get into. And that's the idea of the holodeck. Now, we're going to include not just the holodeck, but like artificial virtual reality. We're going to include like the the plug in the brain, put on the skull cap, um, put on the goggles, the haptic gloves, or step into the room, or buy the chip and insert the chip into your brain, go to another world kind of thing. And I thought we would talk about that because everybody, come on now, I know you've talked about the Star Trek holodeck and the people who the hazmat cleanup crew that's going to have to come behind people from who end up using their half hour in the holodeck or whatever, and just putting on the yellow suits with like a bucket and a giant mops and just spraying the place with disinfectant because somebody's going in there. And if any of you are fans of any of you are fans are of the show or the Orville, there was an episode where Bortus, the Klingon homage to the Klingon or warrior race, ends up getting a porn addiction, and he gets a black market holodeck chip, and he goes in there and he loves himself some other Bortises, man. They're not Bortises. I forget the name of the aliens, but they're all male. Um, After some kind of major war or something, they were all male, genetically modified to become male. And it's like it's pretty interesting. Yeah, yeah, it's pretty funny. But so my feeling about like because we're going to go through these real quick. So my and I'll start off as well. I think the way like um, our virtual reality or like holodecks or something would destroy societies because it's escapism in its extreme, right? I mean, even before we get to the point of zapping our pleasure center of the brain and just getting pure pleasure pumped into us, which is the very next step. The idea that you can live in a high fidelity world of your own making, I think is just incredible. And given enough time and energy, and if technology, because we're going to talk about the world of Wally in a minute. Once automated technologies are available, those automated technologies will give us a lot more freedom. And this is the horror of people who are against um, this is the idea of people that are against transhumanism, because it's like, yeah, human beings will be the slaves of the machine because we'll make ourselves slaves of machines just from the technology itself, because it can, why I only need to work 5 hours a week, if that. I've got machines taking care of me. Why wouldn't I find a room, get bucket naked, and go inside of it, and live in a world of my own creation, right? With a lot of pervy people out there and embracing their perviness, we wouldn't even feel it would be a bad thing to raise up raise ourselves in our own little private plugged in worlds and whatnot. Like, the people from the Matrix, except they're not all plugged into the same Matrix. They're all plugged into their own a matrix of their own well-being. Cameron says, I like the omnidirectional treadmill idea. I saw a video of some people testing a real life prototype, so they would be low tech by the time of transhumanism. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Cam's talking about the omnidirectional treadmill, which is, of course, instead of standing on a treadmill that only revolves in one direction, as you walk and change directions. Of course, you would use this with like the Oculus 3D goggles and haptic gloves. You could stand in one direction and it would sense your motion. So outsiders would see you standing on this, essentially like a platform in in held in space in one location, but your feet would be walking. So you could turn around, you could back up, you could shuffle your feet side to side, and the omnidirectional treadmill would move based on your movements. And honestly, with technology now and it being very predictive and fluid, yeah, I could see it just predicting like, oh, you're about to do a dive roll on the floor, okay, and then you just you do a tumble roll on the floor, but you're really still in the same three-dimensional space. So I think that would be cool. And it's funny because even now there are, if it wasn't for, there are video games that people would not want to leave, right? And there are some video game worlds where people go back into them over and over again. Imagine if you could. Now, this is pretty strange. Imagine you pop in your favorite video game, you put on your goggles, you get ready to play, and it becomes a world in which there is no end, because an AI system could just keep creating everything past the vision of your horizon, right? There's like the meta plot, the development of it, creating new planets. If you go doing sci-fi, if you want to become an undead hunter, if you want to delve down deep into fantasy dungeons, or whatever video game there, Grand Theft Auto, 38.6, based around you and the things you want to do. That would just be incredible. A game that just never ends, and it doesn't have an ending like role-playing games. It doesn't have an ending because the ending is based on your own motivations, what you want to do. So I think not artificial, virtual reality, I think would destroy society, at least make us, you know, have the majority of humanity sitting back in like, grab chairs or something like that, plugged in, maybe go to the local store, get yourself a plug-in colostomy bag that doesn't feel too bad. Like I like version 6.2 because it doesn't make my pee feel hurt. Um, but anyway, plugging that in, maybe get yourself like a backpack or something where you can like have some liquid nutrient in, and you're done. And if it's plugged into your brain, who cares about the survival part? And you could underclock or overclock the speed, so 10 minutes could feel like 10 years if you really wanted to go that far, go the Inception route or something. All right, so moving on from there is automation. And yet yes, we know Terminator, Skynet, and the whole apocalypse that way. Gas mask porn is kind of a thing. Where it's like you got to have the obligatory gas mask, dusty slash foggy terrain. Everything's got to have some dirt and grime on it, with like camo tape wrapped around everything, and oiled cloth, long coats and whatnot. But just before we get there is the idea that we'll become, like virtual reality, will become our own lazy no goods because of technology, where it's not an apocalypse because the technology has destroyed everything, but an apocalypse because we have allowed technology to destroy everything. Like you get enough machines with enough effort enough machines, enough time, energy, and resources, and everything could just be done for us. And that's the argument for universal basic income, right? If a machine can answer the phone and drive a truck and cook food and deliver items, build things from the inside out, 3D print and all that business, what happens to the rest of us? Why would we need a financial advisor when a computer can predict the best financial outcome that we need? Why do we need a human being when we have AI systems that can use, holographic technology to teach our children? And now I know, of course, the resistance against that is the simple idea of replacing a human with a machine, but we're already doing that in small ways anyway. So eventually, at some point, we'll just become lazy sitting in chairs and hope we don't fall out the chair. Now Cameron says virtual reality addiction was explored in Star Trek, which I was happy about. Quote, someone's going to get stuck in there was one of the first things I thought about when I saw a holodeck. Yeah, come on now. We like I said, we've all dreamt of, had fun with, and had our nightmare images of like the holodeck, if for no other reason than being on punishment and having to be the person that has to clean a damn thing out when someone's done with it, especially if somebody comes walking out, of any sexual orientation, scratching their nether regions, like, had fun today, you go in after me, and you're sitting there like, ugh, do I really want to step in there? Oh, it's my turn. Using hand sanitizer and handy wipes, trying to wipe the place up. Put the goop in the corner so you can have your fun too. And then all the people dreaming about, they're distracted. They have to go back. They got to go back to their jobs on the Enterprise. The whole time they're dreaming about it. Yeah, y'all. Hey, what's up, dude? Yeah, Jarl DM says Shadowrun has BTLs. Yep, better than life. Alternate realities where you can live as other people who have it better than you. It's a super addictive substance. Yeah, better like the idea of having like a BTL chip, or I think in Cyberpunk they're called SimStims, simulated stimulation, SimStims and all that. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, even uh, to talk about like there's a movie called Strange Days. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, but anyway, Angela Bassett and a bunch of other people. And Strange Days deals with like it's like a cyberpunk world. And okay, there's a killer who has. I'm sorry, they have these chips that are like better than life chips, right? They're SimStim chips, and you put this thing on your head called a squid, and it basically broadcasting your brain the the actions that someone else is taking. So to escape your mundane life, your harsh life, you could buy a chip for like 30 seconds of just skydiving or mountain climbing or something. And of course, you have your black market ones, which are all like um, sexually oriented or maybe even like violent or whatever, because other people are wearing squids and engaging in a physical activity, and you feel their emotions, their fear, their rage, their adrenaline going, and all that kind of stuff. Well, in the movie, there's a killer who sexually assaults and murders women, forcing them to wear a squid, and then the individual wears a squid that broadcasts his joy into their brains while he is able to record himself attacking them. So you on the black market, you buy the chip, and the chip allows you to feel what it feels to be a sexual or murderous predator attacking people, and feeling what they feel, which is both the horror of being attacked and feeling the joy being pumped into your brain from the attacker. It's pretty sick. Anyway, yeah, it's called Strange Days, and there isn't much. You don't get much more depraved than that, except for the fact that there's like a whole, other than the person doing it, is that there's a whole underground of people that's like, I want to buy the next chip because it feels so good, which is pretty sick. All right, so what? Yeah, Cam. Yeah, it's pretty messed up. It's it's pretty sick, because there's of course snuff chips, right? Where some are pretend to be attacked, but then there's others where they really are attacked or um, assaulted in some kind of way and getting off on it, and then you put the chip in your head so you can feel what they feel. Um, yeah, it's a pretty messed up kind of thing. Now I think I'm thinking of third technology. We already know about like nanotechnology, transporter technology, even space travel and whatnot. Um, I think one thing that might destroy humanity is the very thing that we're going to need to go into space. Yeah, Jarl DM says, experience anything. You could be sure humans would be buying more and more hedonistic BTLs. Oh, hell yeah. You, it makes you, because sometimes in our sci-fi games, I've always wondered, like, sure, we are the heroes, and we're doing really heroic things. We're traveling through space and fighting aliens and putting on, mechanized armor, and we're having gunfights with rail guns and all that kind of stuff. But like, what are the regular people doing? Like, would the population have dropped to nothing, or would it be overpopulated? Is it Soylent Green time where we start like literally taking front end loaders and shoveling groups of living people into dumpsters and then recycling their bodies because they're packing the streets and stuff? I don't know. And would human society? I mean, no one really thinks about, except for there's a movie called, in a book series, a book that I read well before the movie came out, called Children of Men, where the last child is born on Earth, and people literally watch the news following the trials and tribulations of the last children. I think the last child was just turning 17 or 18 or something, and the world was treating them like the ultimate royalty because really no one was giving birth anymore. And the apocalypse, society was breaking down because of a lack of hope. That eventually, at some point, humans will just age themselves out and there will be no more human beings. And the movie, of course, is wrapped around the fact that there's a rumor that there is a young girl that becomes pregnant and they don't know how or where or who or why. And it's a pretty cool, interesting children in there. So the even space travel and the idea of building a habitat on another world in our current day and age, we're like, you know what, we can't wait for something like that to happen, where we go to Mars or the moon, or we're going to build a base and we have a space station and we're going to explore the universe. But the problem, the apocalyptic problem I see in that is that all your good intentions on going to another world and kind of taking our own problems with us just means that we're just going to go to another place and the whole cycle is going to start all over again. So we either take our own problems with us in all of our arguments and all of our disagreements and all of our politics and our economics and the way we handle things, or, and here's another byproduct of that, people go somewhere else to live a different way of life, and that way of life is incompatible to where they came from. So they change everything and they get rid of everything. They drop all the stuff we're used to. People go to another habitat, and those there would be no way to re-assimilate the people who've left with the people who are going. Basically, we start spreading out through our own galaxy. I mean, our own solar system, and then out throughout the galaxy, and we just become strangers to each other. Especially with technology, genetically, we could become divergent. Our own social behaviors become divergent, and much like we're using social media now, where instead of it granting us greater information, what it's actually doing is cutting off our information to from the outside world. I think we would just become inbred. And considering that the entire earth is one big habitat, and you start making these smaller habitats, and when I say small, I'm even thinking 10,000 people, 100,000 people, 500,000 people. It doesn't matter how large of a habitat you build, whether it's a hollowed out asteroid or you find a Dyson sphere or something, those people living there could very, very easily become people who have no connection to you whatsoever. And when I say no connection, I'm talking like the things we hold dear today might just be cast aside. Like, what age what is the age of legal adulthood? And you could start ranking that up 5 years above and below, especially when our our longevity starts getting, when we start living longer, right? We start becoming closer. Anti-agathics start getting better, and we start living longer lives. I mean, and becoming far more brilliant. Does 18 instead become the age of 13 when you're able to teach a child PhD level information very quickly? Does that include maturity? How do we assess maturity? Maybe that instead of 21 being an adult, maybe 26 or 35 or 47 becomes an adult. I mean, that's just a simple thing. Um, Recycling people and having to consume them. If you're in a habitat where recycling is very common, recycling human beings might just be a thing instead of flushing them out and making them become kinetic kill weapons. When you flush them out of into zero gravity and avoid a space, maybe just recycling people just becomes a regular thing. And you're like, you're cannibals. And you're like, no, because we're breathing recycled air. And why wouldn't we just grind up everybody and put their bodies in our hydroponics or everything's grown through nanotechnology or 3D printing or something like that. And your human body is just, you know, spirit wise or not. Hey, if you're religious, your spirit goes on and whatnot. And that becomes a religious thing too, where in science fiction, religion is pretty much cast aside. Who's to say that in years before your favorite science fiction setting becomes a real thing, that there aren't religious wars, that there aren't, what's the recent television show, Raised by Wolves? It's a recent television show, and it's about this idea of androids trying to create a new society with human beings, and there's a religious backlash against androids, and are they alive? Do they have a soul? And we ask these questions now, right? Where if an AI has human intelligence, do we consider it to be a sentient being? Do we give it the rights and privileges of a human when it is not? It was not born. It was created from us. And so I think part of part of an apocalypse would be just the religious backlash of androids and robots and AI just wanting to become, raising children or using, or even if they're doing it secretly, like using biological effluvia from us to genetically assemble some DNA so they can start growing us in exo wombs or something like that. Like, what would happen if that happened? Or an AI becomes a serial killer because it wants to experience what that feels like, or does it to prove a point, right? Imagine an AI. Actually, I started a game like this, but the idea was that PCs had to investigate an AI who purposefully wanted to reenact some of the greatest serial killers in the world for the sole purpose of being put on trial so it could prove a point that it should be considered, have every consideration of being a human, from the greatest to the AI was assumed to be its human's greatest creation, but it wanted to be considered human, so it tried to become humanity's greatest destruction, the evil that it could create, so that it could go to trial, so that it could be convicted and killed to prove its point in, mistakenly in some ways, to prove its point that it should be considered a sentient being as opposed to just being turned off. And of course, the whole story was like the authorities wanted to arrest the programmers that created it, and um, and that kind of stuff. And the AI was saying that they're not responsible, that they were their parents, but you don't put your parents on trial for what your children do if they're considered an adult. And if you're an AI, fully formed AI, for 6 months, are you an adult, or do you have to wait 21 years to be an adult? It was the whole thing. And so I had that as a backdrop. Cameron says, random question. If one was to include magic into a transhumanist future setting, do you think the magical ability would travel with the mind, or would the sleeve hold the magic? You know what? That question is already challenged a little bit in Eclipse phase. So, all right, a lot of science fiction includes psychic abilities. So I'm going to refer to it like the psychic abilities, like magic. It's basically space wizardry, right? And psychic abilities, reading minds, moving things with your mind, being able to travel with, beyond your astral project your mind out of your body, telekinetic abilities. But also, when you combine that with technology in sleeving, the question is, if my body is destroyed and someone takes out my cortical stack and re-sleeves my brain into another body, does the magic, does the psychic potential travel with the copy of my brain, or does it stay within the body? And I think they've defaulted to, it travels with the copy of your brain, which, could you argue the opposite? Of course you could argue it, but it is pretty interesting, because if you had psychic powers and your body is about to die, and you do something to like let's say you're carrying a device, or you have an implant, or you get to a machine where it can project your consciousness somewhere else, or your bloody form is dumped into a some kind of like nutrient bath, and next to it, of course, are all the cables that project your brain into a robot or an android, or um, some other artificially grown being, or maybe even an alien species or something, and your brain goes with it, and your powers. Some would say that it's kind of an indication that there's a soul attached to it. So your soul might be attached to the copy of your brain. And if your psychic abilities have nothing to do with the like your brain matter, but actually something a little bit more intrinsic, I could see religion kind of embracing that, much like in Star Wars. I mean, Jedi are space wizards, and they've got psychic potential and whatnot. I wonder how much. I wonder how deep into the dark side you would have to go, having your limbs replaced with like cybernetics and everything until you don't have those abilities. Did General Grievous have any dark powers? Because he was almost completely cybernetic, except for like a brain casing, a face, and a brain stem, and a couple of like internal organs. So I don't know, but that's actually a pretty good question. Of course, you would have to answer that in your own setting, or read the books that have answer that question answered. But it is pretty interesting if that happens. Now, the opposite, assuming the opposite, that a copy of your brain does not transfer your magical abilities, it might prove why people would be against um, brain uploading, because it's not really you being uploaded, it's you committing suicide. And a copy of a very high fidelity copy of yourself is moving along in your steed. But really what you're doing is every time you upload your brain, you're like dying. Now, Cam says, as far as I know, Grievous had no force training. Okay. I couldn't remember, but I knew he had like a couple of internal organs, like lungs. It was basically internal organs, a brain stem, and a brain case. That's as far as I could remember. All right, so we camps, but then again, as all the main characters show, you don't need training. Zing zow. I hear you. Yeah, I know. Ray and everybody else. I know Broom Kid, all that kind of stuff, but I beg to differ. I think it, it it makes sense why there's a Jedi training school, because they have to find people who have the potential in the first place. But whatever. What do I know? Anyway, okay. So other technologies I think that would destroy us is some technologies show us that there is a hopelessness when it comes to the future. For example, the Fermi Paradox is a thing. If you guys have watched SFIA, Science of Futurism, with Isaac Arthur, he has a huge ongoing series that people constantly ask him about when it comes to the Fermi Paradox. In short, the Fermi Paradox is math shows us that the size of our universe, it should be teeming with life, but we have had no interaction with alien life at all. So why would we not have contact with alien life? And of course, there's different kinds of, they call them filters. So it could, it's alien apocalypse. There's time, there's space, there's technology, there's hidden aliens. There is the we are living in a virtual world concept, a bunch of different Fermi paradoxes. But one thing about the Fermi paradox, when it comes to even scientists themselves or speculators like us, is this idea that the math tells us there should be alien civilizations out there, but we haven't found them, which could be that the math, just no matter how correct we think it is, that there really is no other life out there. And maybe the further we expand our horizons, the more we realize how insignificant we are. And so I could see it a an apocalypse of hope that we are truly alone in the highest regard. And for those of us that may not have any religious affiliations, I could see an apocalypse of hope where people are just like, well, we're traveling out in space, but there's no really good reason for doing it. Kim's like, I'm all down for a good Mary Sue. Sometimes you just need one. Plus, when you can download martial arts into your brain, we will all be Mary Sues. Or will we we just be pay to winner, right? Pay to be a winner, where you can just like, hey, I want to be the best athlete. Okay, you have to, let's see, you have to buy these three training chips, these two very healthy steroids that have no side effects, and sleeve yourself into a sports combat morph, and you're done. I don't know. Some people would say we're headed there too, but the right resources and money can buy you success, or would a society where everyone is as successful as the next one, would we just all be cookie cutter? Like if you went back in time, if our ancestors from the future, like, or our we're the ancestors of the people from the future. They come back 100 years, 200, 300 years, and they're all like genetic supermen, but they're also bored because everyone's a genetic superman, so it really doesn't matter. I don't know. I mean, you know, Kal-El, Superman, going back to a Krypton that still exists. If for some reason every person on the planet is exactly like Superman, what's the other character? Mon-El um, Le- um, from the Legionnaires, um, from the 30th century, where everyone is a Daxamite, and they're, instead of being vulnerable to kryptonite, they're vulnerable to lead or something like that. You could have the same concept there, where yeah, even even the concept of like superhumanism, um, achieving the zenith, the becoming a paragon of ourselves, could lead to boredom because everyone's the same way, especially when it's easy. Yeah, yeah. I mean, hell, why do you think we have such as a society, we don't want to embrace the use of steroids and other body enhancers in sports? Is because if you do that, you, instead of achieving greater successes, you end up starting to put up further barriers to success. Well, um, race car driving. Race car driving is basically has reached its pinnacle, where theoretically you don't even need drivers to win races, because human reaction time is far slower than computers could create. And so now with auto racing, they have to put on limitations. So you're actually keeping the size of the engine smaller. You can only have certain types of tire sizes and speeds. Everyone has to use the same aerodynamics and stuff, instead of pushing the envelope. And I think there's a way for technology to have us push the envelope to the point where we like get bored. Like, oh, of course there's nothing else. Hopefully we'll never get there. Science will always open up another frontier, but I hope hopelessness isn't an apocalypse. Okay, let's bring up nanotechnology. Nanotechnology, or at least von Neumann machines, are a particular horror for people to engage in. Von Neumann machine is basically a, a nanotech object that can recreate itself. It can give birth to its own self. It's like 3D printing, but at a scale that we can barely see. It would just be dust, consuming external materials, building its own self to keep itself propagated, and then, of course, operating on its own programming. So, tech, nanotechnology is a fear, more so of a fear of wiping ourselves out, because it would literally be a technological virus that could break down all matter and consume everything that we are, turning us to dust to become something else. If the von Neumann machines even want us to become something else. Um, in the ninth world of Numenera, there is the Earth after 9 million years has this dust that sweeps across its landscape, and there are others who can like connect technologically to that dust to use it for what essentially would be science fiction magic, right? Like I can summon an object out of thin air. Well, it's not really out of thin air, it's out of the nanotech dust that's around. Or I have the ability to sense electromagnetic pulses. Well, you're not really doing that. You're actually linking into the nanotech dust that's sweeping across the earth and connecting it together to give you heightened senses or um, thicken your skin against outside attacks or um, have a telepathic connection to your allies and whatnot. And it's just basically technological dust that we don't understand how it works anymore, but it just exists. Um, even there's even the horror of we always have the horror of the war to end all wars, and the 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 horror and the apocalypse of the technology that would bring us to, a global war, World War III, something that destroys our atmosphere, the water we drink. If you guys have ever remember the old show, Preppers, about people who are prepping their lives against the coming apocalypse, there's actually subcategories. Like some feel that nuclear war would be a thing. Others feel like it's gonna be starvation. Others feel like it would be the downfall of civilization. Um, Even more feel that like we're gonna have superstorms or it's gonna be a global earthquake or whatever the case might be. But I some even feel that a combination of all of that might happen, and we won't be able to leave Earth when it does, or maybe they're only the rich and powerful and connected will be able to leave Earth or protect themselves, and the rest of us are going to just have to, put on our gas mask porn and run around in our you know, oiled cloth jackets and pseudo camouflage, right? And so the idea that the on yeah um Robin's Little Shadow. Oh, okay. Robin's Little Shadow. Okay. Just now learning about Altered Carbon TV series. Yeah, unfortunately, as of right now, the Altered Carbon TV series after 2 seasons has been canceled, and in the Altered Carbon world, the cortical stack has kind of destroyed people's ethics and morals because some when you extend someone's life, because let's flow into this. Let's flow into um, practical immortality, right? Um, Practical immortality is like, or functional immortality is where maybe you aren't going to live an immortal. Excuse me. You're not going to be immortal, living in your own body, but your brain can continue on as information propagated on to infinity as long as you have a place to put a system to record your brain and a body to sleeve it into. Cameron says the apocalypse will get here with when the sun dies. I saw it on Doctor Who. Well, technically that's true. I've always made the case that the closer you get to true immortality, the more you realize that you will die. Um, the Earth will eventually fall into the sun. Life will get blasted off the face of the Earth as it tumbles into, as we get closer to the sun. The sun will die off. Our own solar system, it will eventually get sucked up into a black hole, or the life on it will be blasted away from like a pulsar or something like that. Robin's Little Shadow says, "Have you studied the movie Zardoz?" No, I don't. No, uh, the name Zardoz sounds familiar, but I don't know the movie. But yeah, the closer you get to immortality, the longer our lives are, the more we realize that the chances of our death are going to get greater, from asteroid impacts to radiation sweeping over the earth to our own galaxy being sucked in or devoured by a black hole, or being consumed by the explosions of 1,000 suns in the center of our galaxy, to gravity affecting us, and then our whole Milky Way galaxy being flung out to the far edges of the universe as the universe keeps expanding, to basically the eventual heat death of the universe. So technically, yeah, immortality kind of means you will die. Um, Even mathematically speaking, the longer time scale you have, no matter how, an example would be most of us will never get struck by lightning, but that's because of our age, right? We won't get struck by lightning because we'll probably die from old age before that. But the longer we live, no matter how rare, a chance, if lightning keeps striking, there is a chance that we can get struck by lightning, even if it's 1 in 1 billion. If you live 1 billion years, that means one person for 1 person a year for 1 billion years is going to get struck by lightning per year, right? So eventually your number will come up at some point. So yeah, just yeah, living forever. Now, the other part of living forever is some of our ethics and morals are tied to the duration of our existence. So, um, being forgiven for our trespasses during our lifetime is a big thing. You know, there's always the person at death's door who wants to be forgiven for their sins. But if you live forever, is there a reason to be forgiven? That's the thing. So technologies can have a pretty good impact on that. Robin's Little Shadow says Stardust is an old sci-fi flick that's along the theme of Wizard of Oz. Basically, the elite class that's nearly immortal or longevity enhanced, similar to Altered Carbon. Oh, yeah. Because like in Altered Carbon, you have the meths, right? And the 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 idea behind meths or Methuselahs is that these people have a lifespan longer than maybe human beings shouldn't have, and they're rich enough to not have to worry about the ramifications of not having ethics or morals. They are above it all. They are literally nose in the air, chin up, chin up. The entire concept of a person who's arrogant and feels that they're better than the lower folk, literally living in the skies above the lower folk. And so, yeah, the death of moral and ethics when it comes to long lives might be a thing. And in Eclipse phase, there's something known as amortalism, which is basically people who are against long lives, who feel that humanity should have a lifespan. And because without it, you know, if you kill innocent people, what, and there's no ramifications from it, maybe you just don't care. Maybe there are no, uh, it could get to the point where you could artificially create human beings, put them in a park because you have enough money to create a habitat that's a park, go around and murder them and hunt them down to kill them, and everyone just shrugs their shoulders like, nah, you're just having fun, you know? Robin's Little Shadow says, just learning about Eclipse Phase is a science fiction horror role-playing game with transhumanist themes and originally published by Catalyst Labs. And quoting the Wikipedia entry, yeah, Eclipse Phase and this is a personal opinion, so don't take this, to me is a award-winning game. The second edition cleans up a lot of the problems from the first edition, at least learning how to get into the game, but it really is about external horrors, the existential crisis that we will be involved in, whether it's creation of black holes or creation of rogue AI or releasing nanotech out, von Neumann nanotech out to the world, or the internal crisis of, you know, habitats filled with or virtual realities filled with pedophiles, you know, How do we feel about plugging the brains of pedophiles into a virtual reality world where they're able to live out their hedonistic, uncontrolled desires? Is do Will technology change the way we think about our own morality when technology can fix the physical problem of the people that are around us? You know, um, would you be willing to live in a world where these people have a plug? You know, maybe there's a little box they wear, or something's wired into their brain, or they take a chip. They can buy a chip and plug it in, and when they go home or they go to these public holodeck parties or virtual reality games or something, they're able to delve into their own hedonistic lifestyle, and you never see it. You never. Is that a solution? Some people would say yes, even if they don't, even if they have a problem with it. Some would say, you know what? As long as serial killers don't kill anyone and they have their own little artificial world to live in and live out their fantasies, sure, why not? But but now we come into the issue of um, the argument of are we imposing our desires and rights over someone else? Um, what about brain modifications? That's another thing where you can edit and manipulate people's memories or something, and you can go into someone's brain and erase the trauma that they felt from being assaulted and brutalized by a killer. So what if you could both erase the trauma of being attacked by a killer, or someone who wants to torture you in any myriad number of ways? We can heal your wounds, and we can also edit out that information out of the brain of the killer. Would would assault become like a misdemeanor? It's just a matter of how much money do you have, or and then would that mean a murderous killer could get away with doing things like, oh no, I cut your cortical stack out of the back of your brain. Hey, as long as I buy you a new body, you know, how about you just sue me in court for a fine, a simple fine, even though I had fun slicing your body open and inserting my fingers into your body as if they were different orifices to enjoy the pleasure that it would be. But you know what? You'll get over it. So, and I've got money to replace your body because I did flush your body down into get it recycled, but I still got your cortical stack. So, my bad. Sorry. There's things like that that could really like you start scratching your head like, wait, what? Or it's the did a tree fall in the forest, right? Um, if we erased the trauma you suffered from an attacker, did the attack really happen? Um, Heck, as a matter of fact, what will happen when crimes start getting committed on space habitats, right? You're If you arrest someone and put them in jail, they are essentially a drain on your resources. You're giving them food and air. You're taking up space. They are a drain on the resources that everybody else has to have. And much like in our own world, we have arguments about, do we or don't we take care of the people who are a drain on our society? It's immediate if someone commits a crime on a space habitat, no matter how small or large that habitat is. And while in science fiction, having prisons and things like that, this is pretty common. The smaller habitats, 10,000 people, 1,000 people or something, they can't afford to have people committing crimes because, hey, how easy would it be to commit a crime to sit and get 3 hots in a cot every day while everybody else is doing the harder work? So do we use brain modifications like a cattle prod in your brain? Like, hey, just thinking about committing a crime zaps you with a paralytic um, zap that basically controls you like a cattle prod. Would deleting your memories be a thing, or um, does everybody have the ability to go into that holographic world that we were talking about, that virtual reality world, to virtually kill their kill their bosses and go get back to work with a smile on their face? All right, Robin's Little Shadow says Zardoz equals a spoof on the word Wizard of Oz. Spoiler, you're fine. Classic goofy movie that brilliantly spoofs on the psychology of Adultery, or the man behind the curtain references. You know, I brought this up before on the channel, that there is a fear from people who, there's a rational fear from people who are against transhumanism or posthumanism, that there are people who are actively creating AI to create our own gods, to create an AI powerful enough to solve all of our problems, and that we create our own godlike being that solves everything we need to do, does everything for us, and we get to sit back with our hands behind our head, feet up, and just go, "Yep, I'm done. I'm finished. I created a godlike being." And now, of course, this AI godlike being wouldn't be, Zeus sitting atop a mountain top, although technologically speaking might be able to do that, but it's the ultimate wish fulfillment. Hey, AI, I'd like to go on a trip to Bora Bora. Could you get me there? And of course, the AI is like, of course, I'm going to send you a vehicle, or plug something in your brain, or download your essence to go into an artificial body that's already located in Bora Bora that I've already set up for you. You just relax there as long as you want. I'll do everything for society. And that's as close to wish fulfillment as you can get, with technologically speaking, right? So some people feel like, creating your own god, that's pretty blasphemous. um, Being able to create artificial intelligence, some people feel like, will an artificial intelligence have a soul? How do you prove it has a soul? It's the same way you prove whether a human being has a soul. And which is, you kind of can't prove it. You have to have faith that it exists or doesn't exist. So I think that's even an apocalypse in and of itself. Now, some people make the argument that uh, Road Warrior, Mad Max, post-apocalypse settings wouldn't really exist, because if the after the downfall of humanity, we are still brilliant enough and have enough knowledge that we could rebuild society within one generation. Some say give it 50 years and we're back to where we used to be, even after a global nuclear war or a pandemic, or um, winning against the war against the machines or something like that. So a lot of people say, having a post-apocalyptic setting really is quite temporary. But, you know, the apocalypse could be our inability to bring ourselves back from the brink. So after a nuclear war or atomic weapons or a pandemic or a, you know, classic zombie outbreak, or technology all shuts down at the same time around the world, that maybe we're not able to come back from it. We're not able to, the apocalypse is the loss of our greatest civilization, much like the fantastical idea of us Atlantis sinking into the ocean, never to know that in our past we were a great civilization that no longer exists any longer. And in a post-apocalyptic setting, that might even be a plot point where the PCs are looking for ways to bring humanity back, but there are enemies preventing that, because they know that once we discover a way to bring humanity back, the cycle will continue all over again. And like in the setting of Numenera for the Monte Cook cipher system, maybe the ninth age is literally us repeating it all over again. And the PCs might be in a ninth age where it turns back in on itself and collapses, and you go into the 10th age of humanity. Um, Another strange apocalypse is Ascension. Ascension is essentially taking ourselves and we ascend to another higher level of thinking, where we no longer need a human body. We don't need this mortal form. We can live as a lattice of energy. Um, it is the Borg concept. It is the loss of self to ascend to a different style of being, that maybe we could all live in a cloud and our brains merge together, where we no longer believe in gender or identity or personal space or anything like that. Like we believe in a unified collective, psychologically, emotionally, even physically, where we no longer have a need to have ownership of materials, where you can just walk into someone's home to take something, or with 3D printing. You who needs permanency when you can just dump something in a recycler and print something out as you will? And so maybe personal property becomes a thing of the past. And so some even feel like that's an apocalypse where we no longer have individuality, but once we plug into the Borg collective, maybe we're like, you know what? This feels kind of good. I mean, I've got 100 million friends within thought range without having disputes about skin color or religion or politics or something. Some people feel like that's where we should be heading, and others feel that that's the complete apocalypse of what we consider to be individuality itself. And so, yeah, the apocalypse of the self, of the destruction of who we are, what our dreams are, or even transhumanism and posthumanism itself. As I start to gear down this show, we start to head towards our end. Here is transhumanism and posthumanism is our ability to control where we evolve to. So no longer will we randomly be evolving, whether it's because of our height or our age or whatever, but we have complete control of our genetics, of our psychology, of our technology. And is that the death of creativity? Is eliminating suffering completely out of our existence. No need to worry about food or shelter or to fight over scraps of resources any longer. With free energy or very cheap energy, the ability to grow food and nutrients for everybody um, at a level that genetics will make possible, that there's no way anyone goes hungry or starves or suffers in the world. We have medical technology that literally is sit back, plug in, and get healed. When we start curing so many diseases that we even start anticipating other diseases that don't even exist yet, and it's just from a simple injection or whatever. Like, is our is te- is it that technology could eliminate so many hardships of our life that we no longer struggle? Some would make the argument that the ability to fail, that the that death around the corner is what makes us strive to achieve even greater results. And so sure, there might even be members of society that reject certain types of technology. I'm looking at you, mountain climbers, deep divers, wilderness survival people who are rejecting certain types of technology because they want to keep that edge on them. Um, Maybe, just maybe, we might even have laws that state like you must reject certain types of technology just to keep your edge. Or there might be communities or enclaves that are like, hey, you want to join us? You don't get a vaccination. You want to join us? You don't get to have a portable fusion generator on your back as a backpack. You want to join us? No cortical stacks, no resleeving, no linking into the greater intergalactic mesh of the cloud and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, there's a number of ways you can go about an apocalypse. But guys, I want to thank you very much for tolerating this broadcast. It's been pretty odd, but guys, everyone have a great day. I will see thee bright early Monday morning.